White passenger calls the cops on black kid in first class. 5 minutes later, she regretted it. This seat is for paying passengers, not charity cases. Children like you don't belong in first class. The words sliced through the quiet cabin of Flight 773, sharp and deliberate, carrying the kind of prejudice that makes strangers wince. Olivia Blackwell stood in the aisle, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the expensive leather of her handbag, jaw clenched and a vein visibly pulsing at her temple. Her finger stabbed the air repeatedly as she pointed at Maya Jackson. Maya's small shoulders tensed, her spine stiffening against the plush leather of seat 2A. The soft fabric of her stuffed penguin Pingu grew damp in her tightening grip as she fought to maintain her composure. The cool air from the overhead vent raised goosebumps on her arms, mixing with the warmth of embarrassment creeping up her neck as other passengers turned to stare. "Ma'am, is there a problem?" Flight attendant Gabriela Rodriguez approached her, professional smile strained at the edges, feet shifting slightly as she positioned herself subtly between Olivia and Maya. The lavender scent of her perfume momentarily cut through the recycled cabin air. "Yes, there's a problem." Olivia snapped, her voice rising enough to make a baby 3 rows back start fussing. Sweat beaded almost imperceptibly along her hairline despite the cabin's cool temperature. "This child is clearly in the wrong section. She needs to move back to economy where she belongs." Passengers began to shift uncomfortably in their seats. A man in 3B lowered his newspaper. A woman across the aisle subtly raised her phone camera app open, sensing something important unfolding. "I have a ticket," Maya said softly, her voice steady despite the tears forming in her eyes. She reached into the seat pocket and pulled out her boarding pass. "Seat 2A. That's what it says." Olivia's mouth twisted into a sneer. "Well, obviously there's been some kind of mistake." Maya's small fingers tightened around Pingu's worn fabric. She'd been taught how to handle herself when traveling alone, but nothing had prepared her for this, for being told she didn't belong somewhere solely because of what she looked like. "Let me see your boarding pass, sweetheart," Gabriela said gently, ignoring Olivia's impatient huff. Maya handed it over with the careful precision of a child determined to prove her worthiness. Gabriela examined it and nodded. "Everything is in order." Gabriela confirmed, her tone professional, but with an edge that suggested she knew exactly what was happening. "This is definitely her assigned seat." "That's impossible," Olivia insisted, her voice rising. "How could a child like her afford first class? There's obviously been some kind of error or—" She paused, her implication hanging in the air like poison. "Or what Ma'am Gabriela asked, her professional demeanor never slipping even as her eyes hardened. "Or something inappropriate is happening." Olivia finished the accusation clear to everyone listening. Through it all, Maya sat still, her back straight, her eyes forward, a single tear finally escaping to trace a path down her cheek. A child forced to bear the weight of an adult's prejudice with more dignity than the adult herself could muster. 12 hours earlier, in a sprawling Georgian-style home in Chicago's Gold Coast neighborhood, Maya Jackson sat at a marble kitchen island, her legs swinging as she carefully cut her pancakes into perfect triangles. Sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the gleaming surfaces of a kitchen designed for both functionality and elegance. "Mom, I've been thinking." Maya began, her voice carrying the careful deliberation of a child who had rehearsed this conversation in her head multiple times. "Doctor." Amara Jackson looked up from her tablet where she was reviewing patient data, her attention immediately shifting to her daughter. Despite being one of the country's leading neurosurgeons and the founder of Jackson Medical Transport, a revolutionary service that provided specialized medical flights for critically ill patients, Amara never made Maya feel like her thoughts were less important than work. "That sounds dangerous," Amara teased, her smile warm as she set down her tablet. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" Maya took a deep breath. "I want to fly to Dad's by myself tomorrow. Not with Aunt Zoe or anyone else. Just me. Amara's expression shifted surprise, followed by the instinctive concern of a mother. Maya, you're only 10. I'm almost 11, Maya corrected, straightening her shoulders. And you always say age isn't about numbers, it's about responsibility and maturity. Amara couldn't help but smile at having her own words used against her. I do say that, don't I? You also said that growth happens when we push beyond what's comfortable. Maya continued, clearly having prepared her argument thoroughly. And that independence is something we earn through demonstrating capability. I'm raising a lawyer, not a doctor, Amara murmured, pride mixing with her concern. Dad agrees it would be a good experience for me. Maya added her trump card. Amara raised an eyebrow. You've already discussed this with your father. Maya nodded, not a hint of apology in her expression. I wanted to know if he thought I was ready before I asked you. He said it was ultimately your decision, but that he thinks I can handle it. That was so like Isaiah, supportive of Maya's independence while still respecting Amara's concerns as the primary custodial parent. Their divorce 3 years ago had been amicable, their co-parenting relationship stronger than their marriage had been. Both successful doctors, they'd prioritized Maya's well-being above all else. Amara studied her daughter, this remarkable child who had inherited her father's analytical mind and her mother's quiet determination. Maya had always been mature for her age, observant and thoughtful in ways that sometimes made Amara forget she was still just a child. Tell me your plan, Amara said finally. If you were to fly alone, what would you do? Walk me through it step by step. Maya's face lit up, but she controlled her excitement, keeping her voice measured as she outlined her plan. I'd pack my carry-on the night before, just essentials. Nothing I can't manage myself. You'd drop me at the airport 3 hours early for the 10 a.m. flight. I'd have my passport, my boarding pass, and emergency contacts in my travel wallet. She continued with impressive detail, explaining check-in procedures, security protocols, and boarding processes. She'd clearly done her research, probably spending hours on airline websites studying unaccompanied minor policies. What about emergencies? Amara asked, testing her daughter's preparation. I'd have my phone fully charged with the portable battery pack in my bag. I know to call you Dad or Aunt Zoe immediately if anything seems wrong. If I can't reach any of you, I should find a flight attendant or airport security officer and explain that I need help. Amara nodded slowly, her medical mind automatically calculating risks against benefits. The flight from Chicago to Los Angeles was direct, just over 4 hours. Maya would be in a controlled environment the entire time. Why is this so important to you, Maya? Amara asked softly. Maya's fingers traced patterns on the marble countertop. Because I need to know that I can do things on my own. Not just because I'm your daughter or Dad's daughter, but because I'm me. She looked up, her eyes serious. And because sometimes I think you still see me as a baby, even though I'm not anymore. The truth of it hit Amara hard. She had been protective, perhaps overprotective, since the divorce. Maya was right. It was time to loosen the reins just a little. All right, Amara said finally. But we're doing this my way. I'll arrange for the flight attendants to keep a special eye on you, and you'll text me at every step of the journey. Maya beamed, then caught herself trying to appear mature and responsible rather than triumphant. Thank you for trusting me, Mom. Amara rounded the island and wrapped her arms around her daughter. I've always trusted you, Maya. Sometimes I just need reminding that you're growing up. Neither of them could have known then that this journey of independence would become a test of courage, far beyond what either had imagined that Maya's carefully planned first solo flight would become a national conversation about privilege, prejudice, and the quiet power of dignity in the face of hate. As Maya and her mother finalized plans for her journey across town in a cramped studio apartment on the edge of Lincoln Park, Olivia Blackwell stared at the eviction notice taped to her door with the kind of detached horror that comes when one disaster simply joins the queue of many. At 52, Olivia's life was crumbling around her with the precision of a controlled demolition. Once the golden girl of Chicago's investment banking scene, she had risen to senior vice president at Meridian Capital, by 35 commanding a seven-figure salary and the fearful respect of everyone beneath her. She'd had the corner office with its sweeping views of Lake Michigan, the vacation home in Aspen, the designer wardrobe that required its own room. Now she had this, a 600-square-foot studio with water stains on the ceiling and an eviction notice giving her 10 days to vacate or face legal action. Olivia yanked the notice down, crumpling it into her handbag as she entered her apartment. The space was meticulously organized despite its shabbiness, a remnant of the control she'd once wielded over her environment and her life. Credit card statements and past due notices were sorted into precise piles on the kitchen counter, each one representing another step toward financial ruin. She moved to her closet, still the largest area in the apartment, and ran her fingers over the remnants of her former life. Designer suits and dresses now several seasons out of date but still exquisitely made. The Hermès scarf she'd bought in Paris during a business trip. The Louboutins she'd worn to close her biggest deal. These weren't just clothes to Olivia. They were armor. Proof that she had once belonged among the elite, that she had earned her place in the world of privilege through intelligence and ruthless determination. The irony wasn't lost on her that tomorrow's flight to Los Angeles, a last-ditch attempt to secure funding for her struggling financial consultancy, would cost her the last available credit on her only remaining uncanceled card. First class because Olivia Blackwell would rather starve than admit defeat by sitting in economy. Appearance was everything in her world, and she would maintain the appearance of success until the bitter end. She pulled out her laptop, last year's model but still sleek and expensive looking, and opened her presentation for tomorrow's meeting with Westridge Ventures. This was it. Her final chance to claw her way back from the disaster that had begun 3 years ago when her risky investment strategy had backfired spectacularly, costing her firm millions and her own reputation everything. The phone rang her landlord again. Olivia silenced it without a second thought. Let him wait. If tomorrow went as planned, she'd pay the full amount owed plus penalties. If not, she refused to consider if not. As she rehearsed her pitch, a desperate but cleverly disguised plea for investment capital, her thoughts wandered to what had brought her here. Not just the failed investments or the market crash, but something deeper, more fundamental. Olivia had grown up believing in a natural order to things, that wealth and privilege were earned through merit, intelligence, and hard work, that her place at the top had been secured through her own exceptional qualities. It had never occurred to her that luck, timing, and privilege itself had played significant roles in her rise. When it all came crashing down, the narrative she told herself wasn't about market volatility or poor risk assessment. It was about unfairness, about less deserving people taking what should have been hers. Every time she saw someone who didn't fit her image of success enjoying the privileges she'd lost, the resentment grew. She booked her first-class ticket to Los Angeles with grim determination, ignoring the warning bells from her banking app. The confirmation came through with a ping, and Olivia allowed herself a small bitter smile. Tomorrow she would sit where she belonged among the successful, the worthy, the entitled. She would reclaim her place in the world, or burn her last bridge trying. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that her desperate grasp at former glory would collide catastrophically with a 10-year-old girl's journey to independence, and that when the dust settled, only one of them would walk away with their dignity intact. O'Hare International Airport hummed with Friday morning energy. The cavernous Terminal 1 filled with the particular chaos of weekend travelers, families heading on vacations, business people making final trips before the weekend, college students returning home. Maya Jackson stood at the check-in counter for Flight 773 to Los Angeles, her small rolling suitcase beside her. her mother's hand resting protectively on her shoulder. Despite her earlier insistence on independence, Maya was grateful for her mother's steady presence as they navigated the bustling terminal. Unaccompanied minor for Flight 773, Dr. Amara Jackson, said to the agent, her voice carrying the quiet authority that made nurses and residents snap to attention in hospital corridors. "We've already completed the online registration." Daniela Martinez, the gate agent working the premium check-in desk, barely glanced up from her computer. "Name? Maya Jackson," Amara replied. Daniela's fingers clacked across the keyboard, her expression unchanging as she located the reservation. "First class seat 2A," she said, a note of surprise entering her voice as she finally looked up first at Amara in her tailored pantsuit, then down at Maya in her neat cardigan and jeans. Something shifted in her expression, a subtle recalibration. "That's correct," Amara confirmed, either not noticing or choosing to ignore the agent's reaction. "I'll need to see ID for both of you," Daniela said, her tone now professionally cool. As they completed the check-in process, Maya noticed a family approaching the adjacent counter, a well-dressed white couple with 2 children approximately her age. The boy and girl, both blonde with matching blue backpacks, bounced excitedly as they too were checked in as unaccompanied minors. "Oh, how exciting," Daniela exclaimed, her entire demeanor transforming as she leaned over the counter to address the white children. "Are you two flying all by yourselves today?" "Yes," the girl replied, beaming with pride. "We're going to visit our grandparents in San Diego." "Well, you are just the bravest, most grown-up travelers I've ever seen," Daniela gushed, emerging from behind her counter to kneel at their level. "What are your names?" "I'm Emma, and this is my brother Jacob," the girl answered. "Emma and Jacob." "I have special treats for such special travelers," Daniela announced, producing wing pins, coloring books, and snack vouchers from a drawer. "And we're going to make sure you board first, so you can get all settled in." Maya watched this interaction silently, her observant eyes taking in every detail of how differently these children were being treated compared to her. She didn't comment, but Amara noticed her daughter's attentiveness and squeezed her shoulder gently. "Here's your boarding pass," Maya Daniela said, returning her attention to them with noticeably less enthusiasm. "Standard boarding will begin at Gate B17 at 9:30 a.m. I believe unaccompanied minors are typically allowed to board early." Amara noted her tone pleasant but firm. "Oh yes, of course," Daniela replied, seeming flustered. "It's just that first-class passengers already have priority boarding, so my daughter will board with the other unaccompanied minors as per airline policy." Amara finished for her smile never wavering. Daniela nodded stiffly. "Of course. My apologies for the confusion." As they walked away from the counter, Maya looked up at her mother. "She didn't give me any wing pins or coloring books." "Did you want those things?" Amara asked carefully. Maya considered this. "Not really, but it would have been nice to be offered them like Emma and Jacob were." Amara nodded, pride mixing with a familiar ache. Maya had always been perceptive about the subtle inequities she faced, even when she couldn't fully articulate them. "You know what, I think we have time to get something even better than a wing pin. How about a book from that shop we passed?" Maya brightened at this suggestion, and they made their way to the airport bookstore, selecting a beautifully illustrated book about aviation pioneers, including Bessie Coleman, the first African-American woman to earn a pilot's license. As boarding time approached, they made their way to Gate B17, where the scene with Daniela was essentially repeated. Upon seeing Maya's first-class boarding pass, the gate agent's eyebrows rose slightly, and she examined the ticket with extra scrutiny. "Is there a problem?" Amara asked, her patience wearing thin. No problem," the agent replied quickly. "It's just unusual for such a young passenger to be traveling alone in first class." "My daughter has every right to be in that seat," Amara said, her voice low but carrying. "I expect her to be treated with the same courtesy and respect as any other passenger." The agent nodded quickly, properly chastened. Of course, Dr. Jackson. We'll take excellent care of her. Meanwhile, in another part of the terminal, Olivia Blackwell strode purposefully toward gate B-17, her designer heels clicking against the tile floor, her posture impeccable despite the weight of her circumstances. Her carefully curated appearance, Burberry trench coat, Salvatore Ferragamo handbag, both from better days, immaculate makeup gave no hint of the financial catastrophe lurking just beneath the surface. She reached the gate just as a boarding announcement was made for unaccompanied minors and passengers needing special assistance. She watched with barely disguised disdain as several elderly passengers and a group of children were escorted to the jet bridge. "Excuse me," she said to the gate agent. "I'm in first-class seat 4C. Shouldn't I be boarding now?" "First-class boarding will begin in just a moment, ma'am," the agent replied. Olivia bristled at having to wait while special assistance passengers boarded before her, but maintained her composed facade. This was just one more indignity in a series of many, and tomorrow, if everything went according to plan, she would begin rebuilding the life she deserved. What neither Olivia nor Maya could have anticipated was that their paths were about to collide in a first-class cabin at 30,000 feet, and that their brief encounter would change both their lives forever, one for the better and one irrevocably for the worse. The first-class cabin of Flight 773 gleamed with subdued luxury wide leather seats, arranged in a 2-2 configuration, each with its own adjustable headrest and extended legroom. Soft lighting accentuated the cream and navy color scheme, while the scent of freshly brewed coffee drifted from the forward galley. Maya Jackson settled into seat 2A with the careful precision of someone determined to prove they belonged there. She stowed her backpack under the seat in front, arranged her book and stuffed penguin on her lap, and fastened her seatbelt with a satisfying click. The weight of her mother's final instructions text after boarding, after takeoff, and upon landing sat comfortably on her shoulders, not a burden, but a connection to home. Flight attendant Sophia Parker moved through the cabin with practiced efficiency, offering pre-departure beverages to the adults and apple juice to Maya, treating the child with the same professional courtesy she extended to the executives and celebrities who frequently occupied these premium seats. "Is this your first time flying alone?" Sophia asked Maya, her smile genuine, as she placed a linen napkin on the armrest. "Yes, ma'am," Maya replied, her posture perfect. "But I've flown with my parents many times." "Well, you're doing wonderfully so far," Sophia assured her. "If you need anything at all during the flight, just press this call button." Maya nodded, absorbing this information with serious attention. "Thank you." As Sophia moved on to other passengers, Maya took out her phone and texted her mother as promised. "Boarded safely. My seat is really comfortable. The flight attendant is nice." Amara's reply came immediately. "I'm so proud of you. Remember our agreement text updates and no talking to strangers unless it's the flight crew." Maya sent back a thumbs-up emoji and tucked her phone into her pocket, turning her attention to the aviation book they'd purchased. The cabin continued to fill with first-class passengers, mostly business travelers in designer suits, a minor celebrity Maya vaguely recognized from a streaming show, and an elderly couple who smiled warmly at her as they took their seats across the aisle. The peaceful atmosphere shattered the moment Olivia Blackwell stepped into the first-class cabin. Olivia paused just inside the entry, scanning the cabin with the proprietary air of someone mentally calculating the status and worth of her fellow passengers. Her gaze swept past the business executives, the celebrity, the elderly couple, all acceptable occupants of this rarefied space in her estimation, until it landed on Maya, small and contained in seat 2A, quietly reading her book. Something in Olivia's expression hardened a flash of indignation crossing her features before she smoothed them into a mask of concern. She approached Maya's seat with deliberate steps, positioning herself in the aisle, so that other boarding passengers had to squeeze past her. "Excuse me, little girl," Olivia said, her voice pitched to Carrie. "I think you must be confused. This is the first-class section." Maya looked up from her book, momentarily puzzled by the interruption. "Yes, ma'am," I know. Well, this section is for full-fare passengers. Olivia continued her smile, not reaching her eyes. Economy class is toward the back of the plane. Why don't you find a flight attendant to help you find your proper seat? Maya straightened her shoulders slightly. This is my proper seat, she replied, her voice quiet but clear. 2A. It's on my boarding pass. She held up the document as evidence. Olivia's eyes narrowed as she examined the boarding pass, disbelief evident in her expression. There must be some mistake, she insisted. First-class tickets are very expensive. You must have misunderstood. By now, other passengers were watching the interaction with varying degrees of interest and discomfort. The elderly woman across the aisle frowned disapprovingly at Olivia, while a businessman 2 rows back deliberately raised his newspaper, choosing not to get involved. I didn't misunderstand, Maya said, her composure remarkable for a child being publicly challenged. My mom booked this seat for me. It's correct. Your mom, Olivia repeated, skepticism dripping from every syllable. And who exactly is your mother that she's putting children in first class? Before Maya could respond, Sophia Parker appeared beside them, alerted by the commotion. Is everything all right here? She asked, her professional smile firmly in place, though her eyes darted between Olivia and Maya with concern. This child seems to be in the wrong section, Olivia stated, as if it were an established fact rather than her assumption. I'm simply trying to help her find her proper seat. Actually, Sophia replied smoothly, Maya is in her assigned seat. She's one of our unaccompanied minor passengers, and we've got her properly situated right where she belongs. Olivia's expression shifted from condescending concern to barely concealed outrage. You're telling me this child is flying alone in first class? That's highly unusual. Are you sure there hasn't been some kind of booking error? No error, ma'am. Sophia confirmed, her professional demeanor never wavering. Now your seat is 4C, just a few rows back. May I help you stow your carry-on? Momentarily outmaneuvered, Olivia had no choice but to move to her assigned seat, though the set of her shoulders and the tight line of her mouth made it clear this matter was far from settled in her mind. As Sophia helped Olivia with her luggage, she quietly added, Ms. Blackwell, all our passengers, regardless of age, deserve to enjoy their flight experience without disruption. I'm sure you understand. Olivia offered a tight smile that contained no warmth. Of course. I was merely concerned about a child being in the wrong place. No disruption intended. But as she settled into seat 4C, Olivia's gaze repeatedly returned to Maya in 2A, her expression calculating. In Olivia's worldview, severely distorted by her recent financial and social downfall, the sight of a young black girl occupying a space she herself could barely afford represented a perversion of the natural order, an order in which people like Olivia belonged in first class, and people like Maya did not. What had begun as a momentary confrontation was rapidly crystallizing into something more dangerous. A woman desperate to reassert her place in the world, fixating on a child she perceived as an interloper in the exclusive domain she once took for granted. Flight 773 pushed back from the gate precisely on schedule, the engine's gentle rumble vibrating through the cabin as the aircraft began its taxi toward the runway. Maya focused on her aviation book, deliberately avoiding eye contact with the woman who had challenged her presence, though she could feel Olivia's periodic glares like pinpricks against her skin. In seat 4C, Olivia simmered with indignation. The woman next to her, a corporate lawyer engrossed in case files, had created a makeshift wall with her documents, clearly uninterested in conversation. This subtle rejection only stoked Olivia's growing sense of grievance. She belonged here among the elite, not that child whose presence in first class defied everything Olivia believed about merit and status. As the plane reached cruising altitude and the seatbelt sign dinged off, Sophia Parker began the first-class beverage service, moving methodically from the front of the cabin toward the back. She placed a linen cocktail napkin on Maya's tray table, followed by a glass of apple juice and a small dish of mixed nuts. "Thank you," Maya said politely, carefully taking a sip from the real glass rather than the plastic cups used in economy. "You're very welcome," Sophia replied. "We'll be serving lunch in about an hour, but let me know if you'd like anything before then." From her vantage point in 4C, Olivia watched this interaction with mounting resentment. The preferential treatment of a child who clearly didn't appreciate the luxury surrounding her, felt like a personal affront. When Sophia reached her row, Olivia was ready. "Excuse me," she said, her voice pitched to Carrie. "I'd like to speak with the purser or the captain." Sophia's professional smile never wavered. "I'm the lead flight attendant for the first-class cabin, Ms. Blackwell. Is there something I can help you with?" "There's a situation that needs addressing," Olivia replied, lowering her voice to a stage whisper that ensured nearby passengers could still hear. "That child in 2A, something isn't right about her being here alone. I'm concerned there may be some kind of impropriety involved." Sophia's expression cooled several degrees. "I can assure you, Ms. Blackwell, all our unaccompanied minors are thoroughly documented and their travel arrangements verified before boarding. There is absolutely no cause for concern. I understand you have protocols," Olivia persisted, "but surely it's unusual for a child to be flying alone in first class. The ticket costs thousands of dollars. Don't you think that warrants at least some verification?" The implication hung in the air, ugly and unmistakable. How could a black child legitimately be in possession of such an expensive ticket? "All necessary verifications were completed prior to boarding," Sophia stated firmly. "Now, may I get you a beverage?" Rebuffed but undeterred, Olivia accepted a sparkling water, her mind already formulating a new approach. When Sophia moved on to the next row, Olivia unfastened her seatbelt and made her way to the front galley where First Officer Thomas Rivera was speaking with another flight attendant. Rivera, in his crisp uniform with 4 gold stripes on the epaulets, turned to acknowledge Olivia with a professional nod. "Good morning, ma'am. Is there something we can help you with?" "Yes, there is," Olivia said, summoning the authoritative tone she'd once used to command boardrooms. "I'm concerned about a security issue that doesn't seem to be getting proper attention." Rivera's expression sharpened with immediate focus, exactly the reaction Olivia had hoped for. In a post-9/11 world, the word security triggered immediate serious responses from flight crews. "What kind of security issue?" he asked, voice lowered. "There's an unaccompanied minor in first-class seat 2A," Olivia explained, adding a note of concern to her voice. "A very young girl traveling alone with a ticket that costs thousands of dollars. Doesn't that strike you as unusual? Potentially suspicious?" "I'm not suggesting anything improper, of course, but in today's world we can't be too careful about potential trafficking situations." Rivera's brow furrowed as he processed this information. "Unaccompanied minors are logged in our manifest, ma'am. Their documentation is verified before boarding." "I understand," Olivia nodded, pressing her advantage. "But special circumstances might warrant extra verification. Wouldn't you agree? Especially when something seems out of place." The subtle emphasis on out of place carried Olivia's real message. This child doesn't belong here. Rivera hesitated, caught between standard protocol and the possibility, however remote, that something might indeed be amiss. "Let me check with the gate agent who processed her boarding," he said finally. "We take all security concerns seriously." "Thank you," Olivia replied, allowing a note of relief into her voice. Better safe than sorry, especially when a child might be involved. As she returned to her seat, satisfaction curved her lips into a small smile. She'd planted the seed of doubt. The flight officer would investigate, and surely he would come to the same conclusion she had. That girl did not belong in first class. Meanwhile, Maya remained oblivious to the machinations occurring around her. She'd finished her apple juice and returned to her book, occasionally glancing out the window at the clouds below. Following her mother's instructions, she took out her phone to send a text. "We're in the air now. The clouds look like a giant cotton candy blanket." The response came quickly. "Beautiful. Everything going okay?" Maya hesitated, her fingers hovering over the screen as she considered mentioning the woman who had questioned her seat assignment. But she decided against it. Her mother had taught her to handle small problems independently, and the flight attendant had already resolved the issue. "Everything's fine," she replied instead. "Love you." "Love you too, brave girl. Text when you land." She returned her phone to airplane mode and tucked it away, unaware that Olivia Blackwell was watching this exchange with narrowed eyes, adding it to her mental list of suspicious behavior. A child that age with an expensive smartphone texting from the air, more evidence that something wasn't right. In the cockpit, First Officer Rivera briefly discussed the passenger's concern with Captain Wilson before making a discreet call to ground operations to verify Maya's travel documentation. The response was immediate and clear. Maya Jackson's first-class ticket had been properly purchased. Her unaccompanied minor status was correctly documented, and all protocols had been followed. There was no security concern whatsoever. Rivera returned to the cabin to inform Olivia that everything was in order, hoping to put the matter to rest. "Ms. Blackwell," he said, kneeling beside her seat to speak quietly. "I've verified with ground operations. The young passenger in 2A is properly documented and her travel arrangements are completely legitimate. There's no security issue." Instead of accepting this conclusion, Olivia leaned forward, lowering her voice to a whisper. "Did they tell you who purchased her ticket? Because I find it very hard to believe that a child from her background would legitimately be in first class." Rivera stiffened the implication in Olivia's words unmistakable. "Ma'am, all passengers who have valid tickets are welcome in their assigned seats, regardless of age or background. I must ask you to respect that and allow everyone to enjoy their flight." As he walked away, Olivia fumed silently. She'd been dismissed by the flight officer just as she'd been dismissed by the flight attendant. No one was taking her concerns seriously, concerns that in her mind were perfectly reasonable, given the incongruity of a child like Maya occupying space in first class. The situation had elevated from an initial confrontation to something more insidious, Olivia actively attempting to involve the flight crew in her prejudice, disguising it as concern about propriety and security. But she wasn't finished. If the flight crew wouldn't address what she perceived as a problem, she would find someone who would. Lunch service in the first-class cabin of Flight 773 proceeded with the practiced choreography typical of premium air travel. White tablecloths appeared on tray tables, followed by proper cutlery, linen napkins, and bread plates. Maya watched with quiet fascination as Sophia Parker transformed her seat area into something resembling a fine dining experience. "Would you prefer the chicken with roasted vegetables or the pasta with mushroom sauce?" Sophia asked Maya, treating her with the same respectful attention she offered adult passengers. "Chicken, please," Maya replied, sitting up a little straighter. "Thank you." 3 rows back, Olivia Blackwell observed this exchange with mounting irritation. The child was being served on china with metal utensils, another violation of what Olivia considered the proper order of things. When Sophia reached her row, Olivia accepted the pasta option with barely concealed contempt, her mind still churning with ways to address the problem in seat 2A. The opportunity presented itself when Sophia was occupied in the galley and Maya rose to use the lavatory. As the child carefully made her way down the aisle, Olivia slipped from her seat and followed, entering the galley area where a phone for crew communications was mounted on the wall. With a furtive glance to ensure no flight attendants were watching, Olivia picked up the phone. Years in corporate settings had taught her how to navigate unfamiliar communications systems, and within moments she was connected to the ground security team at the airline's operations center. "Security, this is operations," came a crisp response. "This is a passenger on Flight 773, Olivia said, injecting urgency into her voice. "I need to report a serious situation regarding an unaccompanied minor in first class who's exhibiting concerning behavior." "What kind of concerning behavior, ma'am?" the security officer asked. "She's been making threatening gestures toward other passengers," Olivia lied smoothly, giving us hostile looks, muttering to herself. "I've noticed her sending multiple text messages, despite the airplane mode requirement possibly communicating with someone on the ground." These were complete fabrications. Maya had been nothing but quiet and well-behaved, but Olivia had committed to her course, now gambling that security concerns would override any skepticism about her report. "The flight crew doesn't seem to be taking it seriously," she continued, "but several passengers are becoming alarmed. Given everything happening in our society these days, I thought it best to report directly to security." The coded language was deliberate. Everything happening in our society was meant to trigger concerns about potential threats while simultaneously playing on racial stereotypes. "We'll alert the captain immediately," the security officer responded. "Please return to your seat." Olivia replaced the handset with a sense of grim satisfaction. Now something would finally be done about the child who didn't belong in her rightful domain. Maya returned from the lavatory to find her lunch waiting. Unaware of Olivia's machinations, she carefully cut her chicken into bite-sized pieces, just as her mother had taught her, taking small sips of water between bites. Her exemplary manners drew an approving nod from the elderly woman across the aisle, who commented to her husband, "Such a well-raised child." In the cockpit, Captain Wilson received the security alert with appropriate seriousness, immediately conferring with First Officer Rivera. "We've got a report about the unaccompanied minor in 2A, Wilson said, his expression concerned. "Supposedly threatening behavior toward other passengers." Rivera frowned. "That can't be right. I was just in the cabin and the child was reading quietly. Who reported this?" "A passenger called directly to ground security. Let's have Sophia check it out discreetly before we escalate further." Sophia received the message from the cockpit with skepticism. She'd been observing Maya throughout the flight and had seen nothing but exemplary behavior from the child. Nevertheless, protocol required investigation of all security reports. She approached Maya's seat with a warm smile, kneeling to eye level. "How's your lunch, Maya? Is everything tasting good?" "Yes, thank you," Maya replied. "The chicken is really delicious. I'm glad to hear that. Have you been comfortable during the flight? Any problems with other passengers?" Maya looked momentarily confused by the question. "No, ma'am. Everyone's been nice." She hesitated, then added quietly, "Except maybe the lady who thought I was in the wrong seat before." Sophia nodded, her suspicions confirmed. "And you haven't been moving around the cabin or talking to other passengers?" "No, ma'am. I've been reading my book and looking out the window." Maya's brow furrowed with concern. "Did I do something wrong?" "Absolutely not," Sophia assured her. "You've been a perfect passenger. I'm just checking in to make sure you're comfortable." As Sophia returned to the galley to report her findings to the captain, the cabin intercom chimed. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Wilson. We're experiencing a brief security protocol situation that requires our attention. Please remain in your seats with your seatbelts fastened until further notice." A ripple of unease passed through the cabin. Passengers exchanged concerned glances, some reaching for their phones despite the airplane mode requirement. Maya's eyes widened with alarm at the announcement. She clutched Pingu tighter to her chest, wondering if something dangerous was happening. Across the aisle, the elderly couple gave her reassuring smiles, trying to calm her obvious concern. In seat 4C, Olivia maintained an expression of concerned vigilance, as if she too were worried about this mysterious security situation, though her eyes periodically darted to Maya with barely disguised satisfaction. The security protocols had been activated. Surely now the child would be properly identified as not belonging in first class. Sophia conferred with the other flight attendants, quietly informing them of her suspicions regarding the false report. Together, they implemented a subtle surveillance of the cabin, each taking note of passenger behaviors while maintaining a calm exterior to prevent panic. 20 minutes into this heightened security protocol, with meal service completed and the cabin growing increasingly restless, First Officer Rivera made a discreet appearance in the first-class section. He observed Maya, noting that she was simply reading her book, occasionally glancing out the window, displaying none of the threatening behavior reported to security. His gaze then swept across the other passengers, finally landing on Olivia Blackwell in 4C. The intensity of her focus on Maya, combined with her earlier concerns about the child, raised immediate red flags. Rivera approached Sophia and whispered something in her ear. She nodded in understanding. Meanwhile, Maya had begun to feel increasingly anxious. The security announcement, the whispered conversations among the crew, the occasional glances in her direction, it was becoming overwhelming. She remembered her mother's instructions about what to do if she felt unsafe or uncertain. "Excuse me," she said softly to Sophia as the flight attendant passed. "May I please call my mom? She told me to call if anything unusual happened." Sophia paused, considering the request. Normally, phone calls weren't permitted during flight, but given the circumstances, a child being targeted by false accusations, an exception seemed appropriate. "Let me check with the captain," Sophia replied. "I think we can arrange that." When Captain Wilson heard the request, he immediately approved it. "The poor kid's probably terrified by all this. Let her call her mother." What neither the captain nor Sophia could have anticipated was that this simple act of kindness, allowing a frightened child to call her mother, would set in motion a chain of events that would change the course of the flight, the lives of everyone involved, and potentially the policies of the entire airline industry. "You have 5 minutes, sweetie," Sophia said, handing Maya the satellite phone from the first-class cabin. "Just press this button to connect once you've dialed the number." Maya nodded gratefully, her small fingers carefully inputting her mother's cell number from memory. The phone rang 3 times before Dr. Amara Jackson answered, her voice crisp and professional despite the unknown number appearing on her screen. "Dr. Jackson speaking." "Mom, it's me," Maya said, her voice steady despite her anxiety. Years of watching her mother handle emergencies had taught her the value of calm communication. Amara's tone immediately shifted from professional to maternal. "Maya, what's wrong? Are you calling from the plane?" "Yes. They said I could because of a security situation," Maya explained. "The captain made an announcement and everyone has to stay in their seats. The flight attendants keep whispering to each other and looking at me." "Are you in danger?" Amara asked, instantly alert. In the background, Maya could hear her mother's office door closing, a sign that Amara was giving this call her complete attention. "I don't think so," Maya replied. "But there's a lady who's been acting weird. When I first got on the plane, she told me I didn't belong in first class. The flight attendant told her I was in the right seat, but she kept staring at me. And now there's this security thing, and I don't know what's happening. May I speak with a flight attendant or officer, please?" Amara requested, her voice taking on the calm authority she used in operating rooms when critical decisions needed to be made quickly. Maya handed the phone to Sophia, who had been standing discreetly nearby. "My mom wants to talk to you." "This is Senior Flight Attendant Sophia Parker," she said, maintaining a professional tone despite the unusual circumstances. "This is Dr. Amara Jackson. Maya's mother came." The reply, the connection remarkably clear, despite being a satellite call. "Can you explain what's happening with my daughter?" She mentioned a security situation and a passenger who confronted her about being in first class. Sophia moved a few steps away from Maya, lowering her voice. "Dr. Jackson, we've had a situation where a passenger made a direct call to our ground security team with allegations about your daughter exhibiting threatening behavior toward other passengers. After investigation, we've found these claims to be completely unfounded. Maya has been nothing but exemplary throughout the flight." "I see," Amara replied, her voice chillingly calm. And this passenger, would it happen to be the same person who initially questioned my daughter's right to be in first class? We believe so, yes. May I ask what specific allegations were made? Sophia hesitated but decided transparency was appropriate given the circumstances. The passenger claimed Maya was making threatening gestures, giving hostile looks to other passengers, and violating flight regulations by sending text messages. None of these claims have been substantiated by any crew member or other passenger. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. When Amara spoke again, her voice had an edge that made Sophia instinctively straighten her posture. What you're describing is a passenger who targeted my 10-year-old daughter because of her race, escalated to making false security reports when her initial attempt to have Maya removed from first class failed, and has now caused a security incident that's frightening my child. Do I understand the situation correctly? That appears to be an accurate assessment, Dr. Jackson. I want to speak with the captain immediately. Amara stated not a request, but a directive. One moment, please. Sophia conveyed the satellite phone to the cockpit where Captain Wilson took the call. His initial greeting was met with a response that caused him to sit up straighter in his seat. Captain Wilson, I am Dr. Amara Jackson, founder and CEO of Jackson Medical Transport. My company operates specialized aircraft for medical evacuations across North America. I tell you this not to impress you, but so you understand that I'm intimately familiar with aviation protocols, FAA regulations, and the legal implications of filing false security reports on aircraft. In the main cabin, Maya had returned to her seat, slightly reassured by having spoken with her mother, but still uncertain about the ongoing situation. Olivia continued to watch her with barely disguised contempt, increasingly frustrated that her plan hadn't resulted in the child's removal from first class. Unbeknownst to everyone in the passenger cabin, Captain Wilson was receiving information that would dramatically alter the course of events. After identifying herself, Dr. Jackson had provided verification codes that allowed the captain to confirm her identity through the airline's database system. What he discovered sent a jolt of recognition through him. Jackson Medical Transport wasn't just any medical evacuation service. It was the premier provider in the field with contracts to virtually every major hospital system in the country. Moreover, Dr. Amara Jackson was a nationally renowned neurosurgeon whose innovative approaches to emergency medical transport had saved countless lives. And someone on his aircraft had just filed a false security report against her daughter. Dr. Jackson. Captain Wilson said, his tone reflecting his new understanding of the situation. I want to personally apologize for what your daughter has experienced. We're implementing protocols to address the situation immediately. I appreciate that, Captain Amara replied. I need to know what specific actions you're taking to ensure my daughter's safety and dignity for the remainder of the flight. We're sending security officers to meet the flight upon landing to address the false report. In the meantime, I'll have First Officer Rivera and Senior Flight Attendant Parker closely monitor the situation. Your daughter will be protected. That's not sufficient, Amara stated firmly. I want the passenger who made these false accusations identified and documented. I want statements collected from surrounding passengers who can attest to my daughter's actual behavior. And I want all security footage from the cabin preserved as evidence. Those are reasonable requests, Dr. Jackson. We'll implement them immediately. One more thing, Captain. I'll be meeting this flight personally when it lands. Please inform your ground crew to expect me at the gate. As the call concluded, Captain Wilson sat for a moment processing the implications. A passenger had racially profiled and then falsely reported the daughter of one of the most influential figures in medical aviation, a woman whose company had contracts worth millions with commercial airlines for specialized medical equipment. The professional consequences of mishandling this situation would be significant, but more importantly, a child had been targeted because of her race, and that demanded an immediate and appropriate response. He picked up the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Wilson. Our security protocol has been resolved. There is no security threat on this aircraft. We apologize for any concern this may have caused and will be returning to normal service immediately. We expect to land in Los Angeles on schedule at 12:45 p.m. local time." In the first-class cabin, passengers visibly relaxed at this announcement. Sophia approached Maya's seat with a reassuring smile. "Your mom asked me to tell you that everything's fine now and she'll be meeting us when we land in Los Angeles." Maya's eyes widened with surprise. "But she's in Chicago. Los Angeles is really far. Your mom seems like someone who makes things happen when she needs to," Sophia replied with a knowing smile. "She also asked me to give you this." She handed Maya a fresh glass of apple juice and a warm chocolate chip cookie on a small plate. "She said it might make you feel better." Across the aisle, the elderly couple who had been watching the events unfold with growing concern gave Maya encouraging smiles. "You've been very brave, young lady," the woman said kindly. 3 rows back, Olivia Blackwell seethed with frustration. Her plan had apparently failed, the security alert had been canceled, and the child was still being treated like a valued passenger rather than the interloper Olivia perceived her to be. Worse, the flight attendants now seemed to be treating Maya with extra attention and care. Olivia was so absorbed in her resentment that she failed to notice First Officer Rivera taking discreet photographs of her with a small camera, or Sophia quietly speaking with nearby passengers documenting their observations of Maya's actual behavior throughout the flight. What Olivia couldn't have known, what no one in the cabin yet realized, was that the power dynamic had already shifted dramatically. Dr. Amara Jackson was not just any concerned parent. She was a force of nature with the resources, connections, and determination to ensure that what had happened to her daughter would have consequences far beyond this single flight. As Flight 773 continued its journey westward, the true reckoning was only beginning to take shape. A reckoning that would forever change Olivia Blackwell's life, transform airline policies regarding discrimination, and demonstrate to everyone involved the profound mistake of underestimating a mother's resolve to protect her child from injustice. Los Angeles International Airport buzzed with its usual frenetic energy as Flight 773 from Chicago began its final approach. In the first-class cabin, Maya Jackson sat with perfect posture. Her seat returned to its upright position, tray table stowed, and Pingu, the penguin, secured in her lap. The remainder of the flight had passed without incident, though the atmosphere remained charged with unspoken tension. Flight attendant Sophia Parker had maintained a protective presence near Maya's seat, while First Officer Rivera had made several appearances in the cabin, each time casting a watchful eye over the passengers, particularly Olivia Blackwell, who had retreated into stony silence, her earlier confidence curdling into apprehension as she sensed the crew's focused attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent into Los Angeles International Airport," Captain Wilson's voice announced over the intercom. "Local time is 12:38 p.m. with clear skies and a temperature of 75 degrees. We expect to arrive at Gate 56B in approximately 15 minutes. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until we've reached the gate and the seatbelt sign has been turned off." He paused briefly before adding, "We also want to inform you that we'll be implementing a modified deplaning procedure today. When we reach the gate, we ask that you remain seated until instructed to deplane by the flight crew. Thank you for your cooperation." This unusual announcement sent a ripple of curiosity through the cabin. Modified deplaning procedures were typically reserved for medical emergencies or security situations. Passengers exchanged questioning glances, but the flight attendants maintained professional composure, offering no explanation for the change. Maya fidgeted slightly in her seat, anxiety mingling with anticipation. Her mother had never broken a promise, so if she said she would be at the gate, Maya knew she would be there. Though how she had managed to reach Los Angeles from Chicago during a 4-hour flight remained a mystery. As the aircraft touched down with a gentle bump and the thrust reversers engaged with their characteristic roar, Maya felt a surge of relief. Whatever had happened during this flight, Whatever that woman had tried to do, it was almost over now. The taxi to Gate 56B seemed to take longer than usual, the aircraft moving at a deliberate pace through LAX's complex network of taxiways. When they finally reached the gate and the seatbelt sign dinged off, Captain Wilson's voice returned over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, as mentioned earlier, we'll be implementing a modified deplaning procedure today. At this time, we ask that all passengers remain seated. We'll provide further instructions momentarily." In seat 4C, Olivia Blackwell shifted uncomfortably, a sense of foreboding growing within her. Something wasn't right. The flight crew's behavior, the modified deplaning announcement, the way the other flight attendants were now positioned strategically throughout the cabin, it all pointed to something beyond normal procedures. The cabin door opened, but instead of the usual ground crew, 2 uniformed airport police officers stepped aboard, followed by a woman whose very presence seemed to transform the atmosphere in the cabin. Dr. Amara Jackson moved with purpose, her tailored charcoal suit and immaculate appearance, projecting authority without effort. Her natural hair was styled in a sophisticated updo, and she wore minimal jewelry, just diamond stud earrings and a platinum watch that caught the light as she moved. There was nothing flashy about her, yet something in her bearing commanded immediate attention and respect. Behind her came a tall, broad-shouldered man in a perfectly fitted suit, Marcus Bennett, her chief of security, and a woman in a navy blazer carrying a tablet and legal portfolio, Valentina Ortiz, Jackson Medical Transport's lead counsel. Maya Amara called, her voice carrying clearly through the cabin. "Mom." Maya's face lit up with relief and surprise. She started to unfasten her seatbelt, but Sophia gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Just one moment, sweetie," she murmured. "Let your mom come to you." Amara moved down the aisle with measured steps, her focus entirely on her daughter until she reached row 2. Then, and only then, did she allow her gaze to sweep briefly across the cabin, noting the faces of the passengers watching this scene unfold with growing curiosity and confusion. "Are you all right?" Amara asked Maya, kneeling to eye level beside her seat. Maya nodded her composure, finally cracking now that her mother was present. "I was scared during the security thing," she admitted in a small voice. "But Ms. Parker was really nice to me." Amara embraced her daughter briefly, then straightened to her full height. When she turned to address the cabin, her expression had transformed from maternal concern to something altogether more formidable. "My name is Dr. Amara Jackson," she announced, her voice clear and carrying. "I am the founder and CEO of Jackson Medical Transport and the mother of this child who has been subjected to racial profiling and false security accusations during this flight." A murmur ran through the cabin as passengers processed this information. Several reached for their phones, sensing they were witnessing something significant. "Captain Wilson Amara continued, with your permission, I'd like to address your passengers before they deplane." The captain, who had emerged from the cockpit, nodded his assent. "Of course, Dr. Jackson." Amara turned back to the cabin, her gaze coolly assessing. "During this flight, someone made a deliberate decision to target my daughter because of her race. This person first attempted to have Maya removed from her rightfully assigned seat in first class, and when that failed, escalated to making false security reports claiming that a 10-year-old child was exhibiting threatening behavior." Her words hung in the air, stark and uncompromising. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others looked pointedly at Olivia Blackwell, having witnessed her earlier confrontation with Maya. "I want to be absolutely clear," Amara continued. "This was not a misunderstanding. This was not a security concern. This was a calculated attempt to weaponize racial bias and security protocols against a child who was doing nothing more than occupying space that someone decided she didn't deserve to occupy because of the color of her skin." In seat 4C, Olivia Blackwell's face had drained of color. She clutched her handbag with white-knuckled intensity. Her earlier self-righteousness evaporated completely. She had expected to land in Los Angeles, proceed to her business meeting, and never think about the child in 2A again. Instead, she found herself facing what appeared to be extremely serious consequences. The passenger responsible for these actions will be identified and held accountable. Amara stated her tone, leaving no room for doubt. Not just for what they did to my daughter, but for the potential harm their false report could have caused to everyone on this aircraft. Marcus Bennett stepped forward, handing Amara a tablet. She glanced at it briefly before continuing. I'm also here to inform everyone that Jackson Medical Transport will be filing a formal complaint with the FAA regarding this incident, and we are prepared to pursue all available legal remedies against the individual responsible. Filing false security reports on an aircraft is a federal offense with serious consequences. Captain Wilson moved to stand beside Amara. Dr. Jackson, on behalf of the airline, I want to express our deepest apologies for what your daughter experienced today. I assure you we're taking this incident extremely seriously and will be cooperating fully with all investigations. Amara acknowledged this with a slight nod before addressing the cabin once more. I recognize that many of you are innocent bystanders in this situation, and I apologize for the delay in your deplaning. The airport police officers will now be taking statements from those seated in the first-class cabin who witnessed any part of these events. Once your statement has been recorded, you'll be free to proceed to the terminal. In a final powerful gesture, Amara turned directly toward Olivia Blackwell, making eye contact for the first time. As for the passenger who initiated this incident, you will be remaining on the aircraft until the police have completed their preliminary investigation. The officers who had been standing quietly at the front of the cabin now moved purposefully down the aisle, stopping at row 4. Ma'am, one of them said to Olivia, we'll need you to remain seated while we gather statements from the other passengers. Olivia's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words emerged. The carefully constructed facade she had maintained throughout her financial downfall, the polished image she had clung to as her last connection to her former status, crumbled completely under Amara Jackson's unwavering gaze. As the gravity of her situation became clear, Olivia finally found her voice. "This is ridiculous," she protested weakly. "I was only expressing concern about an unusual situation. There's nothing illegal about that. Filing a false report with aircraft security is indeed illegal," one of the officers corrected her, "as is making discriminatory statements that disrupt flight operations. We'll be taking your statement as well, ma'am." The methodical process of collecting passenger statements began overseen by Valentina Ortiz, who ensured that each account was properly documented and time-stamped. Meanwhile, Amara returned her full attention to Maya, who had watched the entire scene with wide-eyed amazement. "You came all the way from Chicago," Maya said softly. "How did you get here so fast?" Amara smiled, some of the steel leaving her expression as she focused on her daughter. "I took one of our medical jets," she explained. "When you called, I was already at the hangar reviewing equipment installations. We were in the air 20 minutes later." Maya's eyes widened further. "You flew a whole private jet, just because I called Maya," Amara said, taking her daughter's hands in her own. "I would cross oceans and move mountains if you needed me. A quick flight to Los Angeles is nothing. This quiet exchange, this moment of maternal love amidst the tension of the larger situation, did not go unnoticed by the surrounding passengers. Several watched with softened expressions, perhaps recognizing in Amara's words and actions a universal truth about a parent's devotion. What none of them could have known in that moment was that the scene unfolding in the first-class cabin of Flight 773 would soon extend far beyond this single incident, this single flight, this single airline. The ripples of Amara Jackson's arrival, her commanding presence, her uncompromising demand for justice, her refusal to allow racial bias to go unchallenged, would spread through the aviation industry and beyond, forcing a reckoning that was long overdue. And it had all begun with a woman who couldn't accept that a black child belonged in seat 2A. As statements were collected from first-class passengers, Marcus Bennett set up a portable display on the bulkhead at the front of the cabin. The sleek device clearly customized with advanced technology powered on to reveal a high-definition screen, split into multiple viewing angles. Dr. Jackson Bennett said, his deep voice carrying easily through the cabin. "The footage is ready for review." Amara nodded, addressing the remaining passengers and flight crew. "With Captain Wilson's permission, I'd like to show everyone exactly what transpired during this flight. Jackson Medical Transport develops specialized camera systems for medical aircraft to document treatment protocols during emergency transports. A modified version of this technology is being tested on several commercial carriers, including this one." Captain Wilson stepped forward. "That's correct. This aircraft is part of a pilot program testing advanced security and documentation systems. The footage Mr. Bennett is about to show was captured by cameras installed throughout the cabin for security purposes. All passengers are informed of this monitoring in the terms and conditions of their ticket purchase." Olivia Blackwell, still seated in 4C under the watchful eye of an airport police officer, felt a cold wave of dread wash over her. Cameras, recording, everything. Her mind raced through every interaction she'd had during the flight, every word she'd spoken about Maya. Bennett tapped the screen and crystal-clear footage began to play, complete with audio enhancement that allowed even whispered conversations to be heard distinctly. The timestamp in the corner showed the exact moment when Olivia had first approached Maya's seat during boarding. "This seat is for paying passengers, not charity cases. Children like you don't belong in first class." Olivia's words, her dismissive tone, her assumption of authority, all were preserved in perfect clarity. Several passengers winced at hearing the interaction again, perhaps more aware now of the naked prejudice in Olivia's statement than they had been when it occurred. The footage continued showing Sophia's intervention and Olivia's reluctant retreat to her assigned seat. Then came her conversation with Sophia during beverage service. Her voice lowered, but still perfectly audible. "That child in 2A. Something isn't right about her being here alone. I'm concerned there may be some kind of impropriety involved." Bennett paused the footage. "Dr. Jackson, would you like me to continue with the galley footage?" Amara nodded, her expression grave. The display switched to a view of the forward galley where Olivia could be seen making her clandestine call to ground security. Every word of her fabricated report was captured with damning clarity. "She's been making threatening gestures toward other passengers, giving us hostile looks, muttering to herself. I've noticed her sending multiple text messages, despite the airplane mode requirement possibly communicating with someone on the ground." A collective intake of breath was audible throughout the cabin as passengers realized the extent of Olivia's deception. The contrast between her allegations and the reality of Maya's behavior shown in a split-screen view of the child quietly reading her book at the exact time Olivia claimed she was being threatening was stark and undeniable. For comparison, Bennett continued, "Here's a compilation of Maya's actual behavior throughout the flight." The screen displayed a series of clips showing Maya reading, looking out the window, carefully eating her lunch with perfect manners, and occasionally cuddling her stuffed penguin. Not once did she interact inappropriately with any passenger, make threatening gestures, or behave in any way that could be construed as concerning. Valentina Ortiz stepped forward, her tablet displaying official-looking documentation. "For the record, we've compiled statements from 12 passengers and 4 crew members, all confirming that at no point did Maya Jackson exhibit any behavior that could reasonably be considered threatening or inappropriate. These statements have been witnessed and time-stamped." One of the police officers nodded, making notes in his official report. "Ms. Blackwell, based on this evidence, will be filing a preliminary charge of making a false report to aircraft security, which is a federal offense under 49 U.S. Code Bayer 46507. Additional charges may follow after consultation with the U.S. Attorney's Office." Olivia's face had gone from pale to ashen. This is absurd," she stammered. "I was genuinely concerned. I had no way of knowing the child was what, Ms. Blackwell?" Amara interjected, her voice cutting like a surgeon's scalpel. No way of knowing my daughter was the child of someone with the resources to hold you accountable. Because that seems to be your only regret here. Not that you targeted a child because of her race, but that you chose the wrong child to target. The brutal accuracy of this assessment left Olivia speechless. It was true. Had Maya been any other black child, one without a powerful mother, one without access to irrefutable evidence, one without the means to fight back Olivia's actions, might have succeeded in having her removed from first class, or worse. I believe the evidence speaks for itself. Amara continued, addressing the officers. My legal team will provide you with copies of all footage and documentation for your investigation. As the officers prepared to escort Olivia from the aircraft, an elderly gentleman who had been sitting across from Maya stood up. Dr. Jackson, he said, his voice carrying the weight of his years. I want to apologize for not speaking up sooner when that woman first confronted your daughter. I saw what was happening and I said nothing. That was wrong of me. Amara regarded him thoughtfully. Thank you for your honesty. Silence in the face of injustice is its own form of complicity. I hope in the future you'll find your voice when you witness someone being mistreated, regardless of whether they have a mother like me to defend them later. The man nodded properly, chastened, but also seemingly appreciative of her direct response. A business executive who had been seated near Olivia also spoke up. Dr. Jackson, I work in corporate compliance and I'm impressed by the thoroughness of your documentation system. Have you considered marketing this technology to other airlines for anti-discrimination monitoring? That's an interesting suggestion, Amara replied. Our systems were developed primarily for medical documentation, but their application in combating discriminatory behavior is certainly worth exploring. As this exchange occurred, Maya watched her mother with a mixture of awe and pride. This was a side of Amara she rarely saw the commanding CEO, the innovator, the force to be reckoned with. At home, her mother was warm and nurturing, focused on Maya's education and development. But here, confronting injustice with unwavering resolve, Dr. Amara Jackson was truly magnificent. Captain Wilson approached Amara again. Dr. Jackson, now that statements have been collected, we can begin deplaning the other passengers if you're ready. Amara nodded. Of course, Captain. We've delayed everyone long enough. As the deplaning process began, Sophia Parker knelt beside Maya one last time. You were so brave today, she said warmly. I hope your next flight is much less eventful. Thank you for being nice to me, Maya replied sincerely. Even before you knew who my mom was. Sophia smiled. That's my job, sweetheart, treating every passenger with respect, regardless of who they are or where they're sitting. The simple truth of this statement that basic respect should be afforded to everyone, regardless of their status or background, stood in stark contrast to Olivia's behavior throughout the flight. It was a lesson Maya would carry with her long after the details of this incident had faded from memory. As the cabin gradually emptied with passengers casting curious glances back at the unfolding drama, Olivia Blackwell remained in seat 4C, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her. The business meeting that had been her last hope for financial salvation was now impossible. Instead, she faced potential criminal charges, civil liability, and the destruction of whatever professional reputation she had managed to preserve. Ms. Blackwell, one of the officers finally said, "We need you to come with us now." As Olivia was escorted from the aircraft, her designer handbag clutched like a shield against what awaited her, she passed Maya and Amara in the front row. For a brief moment, her eyes met Maya's. The child she had tried to displace, diminish, and criminalize, and found not hatred or triumph, but something more unsettling, simple curiosity, as if Maya were trying to understand why someone would go to such lengths to hurt a person they didn't even know. That look, that innocent question in a child's eyes, would haunt Olivia Blackwell long after the legal consequences of her actions had been resolved. 6 months after Flight 773, the Equal Skies Summit convened at Chicago's McCormick Place Convention Center bringing together representatives from airlines, regulatory agencies, civil rights organizations, and the technology sector. The grand ballroom's digital displays showcased real-time data on discrimination incidents across participating carriers' numbers that had steadily declined since implementation began. Amara Jackson moved through the space with purpose, her tailored navy suit and minimal jewelry reflecting her preference for substance over spectacle. She paused beside a technical demonstration of the monitoring system's encryption protocols, where aviation security experts examined the specialized cameras that captured high-definition video while maintaining passenger privacy through AI-driven redaction of sensitive information. The quad-redundant encryption exceeds FAA Section 117 security requirements by 300%, explained the technician, highlighting how footage remained inaccessible unless a formal discrimination complaint triggered the carefully designed access protocols. Dr. Jackson called Gerald Whitman, CEO of National Airways, approaching with several international airline executives. These gentlemen from European and Asian carriers are interested in implementing similar protocols across their fleets. Would you mind sharing your insights on the global adaptation considerations? This international expansion represented a significant milestone. What had begun as an American response to American patterns of racial discrimination was being recognized as a framework that could address various forms of bias in different cultural contexts. Across the convention center, Maya Jackson addressed the Youth Leadership Forum, her voice steady but with the natural animation of a child sharing something important. Unlike her mother's carefully measured public persona, Maya spoke with an unscripted authenticity that resonated particularly with the young audience. When that lady told me I didn't belong in first class, I was really confused at first, she explained, gesturing with hands that still occasionally fidgeted with her airplane pin. I knew my ticket said 2A. I knew my mom had bought it. But for a minute I started to wonder if maybe I had done something wrong without realizing it. This admission that even a child confident in her right to occupy space could be made to question herself when that right was challenged created a ripple of recognition among the audience, particularly among students of color who had experienced similar moments of unwarranted self-doubt. The most important thing I learned, Maya continued, standing a bit straighter, is that change doesn't just happen because something bad occurs. It happens because people decide to use that bad thing as a reason to make things better. After her presentation, a small group of children approached Maya, their expressions reflecting a mix of admiration and hesitation. "My mom says you're like Rosa Parks for airplanes," said a black girl about Maya's age, her voice soft but earnest. Maya smiled, slightly embarrassed by the comparison. "I don't think I'm anything like Rosa Parks." She chose to protest. "I was just sitting in a seat I had a ticket for." "That happened to me too," said a Hispanic boy who appeared slightly older, maybe 12 or 13. "On a train to Boston. A man told me and my abuela we were in the wrong car and should move to coach even though we had first-class tickets." "What did you do?" Maya asked, genuinely curious. Nothing, the boy admitted, looking down. "We just moved. Abuela said it wasn't worth fighting." Maya nodded, understanding the calculation that so many families make, weighing dignity against safety, principle against peace. Then, with a decisiveness that echoed her mother's leadership style, she said, "Would you and your abuela like to share your story with our foundation? We're collecting experiences like yours to show that what happened to me wasn't just one bad incident." This proactive outreach, Maya actively seeking out and amplifying other children's experiences, rather than simply sharing her own, demonstrated her evolution from passive recipient of discrimination to active advocate for change. The boy's face brightened as he nodded eagerly, and Maya pulled out a small notepad to write down his contact information herself rather than delegating the task. "I'll call you next week," she promised. "Your story matters too." Industry Implementation Challenges. The path to implementing the Equal Skies Initiative faced significant technical and organizational hurdles. At a particularly contentious industry meeting, airline executives raised concerns about the practical challenges of retrofitting existing aircraft with monitoring systems. We're talking about a fleet of 847 aircraft across 217 destinations, argued Michael Bennett, CEO of AeroCorp International. The downtime alone would cost millions, not to mention the hardware installation and crew training. His voice carried the confident dismissal of someone accustomed to using financial arguments to shut down unwelcome changes. Amara remained unruffled. The phased implementation schedule accounts for routine maintenance cycles. Each aircraft can be equipped during already scheduled C-checks without adding downtime. Even so, Bennett persisted. We're looking at an estimated $28.4 million in initial costs. Our shareholders won't accept that kind of expense for what amounts to a PR exercise. Isaiah Jackson, who had joined the implementation committee to provide medical privacy expertise, leaned forward. The scar on his chest, legacy of the heart surgery that had saved his life at 32, was barely visible above his impeccably knotted tie. With respect, Mr. Bennett, he said, his deep voice carrying the measured authority of a surgeon accustomed to high-stakes decisions, characterizing anti-discrimination measures as a PR exercise, reveals precisely the mindset this initiative aims to address. The room tensed at this direct challenge from Isaiah, typically the more diplomatic counterpart to Amara's forceful advocacy. Bennett's face flushed slightly as Isaiah continued. As to your financial concerns, our analysis indicates participating airlines will see reduced liability insurance premiums of approximately 12% annually due to decreased discrimination claims. National Airways has already documented a 3% increase in bookings among minority passengers, representing roughly $41.7 million in additional annual revenue. Isaiah slid a tablet across the table displaying these figures in detailed charts. The ROI calculation shows full cost recovery within 14 months, followed by sustained positive returns. This isn't charity, Mr. Bennett. It's sound business practice aligned with ethical imperatives. This intervention, Isaiah, using the financial language of corporate leadership to dismantle resistance to moral imperatives, demonstrated the complementary strengths the Jacksons brought to their advocacy. Where Amara often led with principle and vision, Isaiah could translate those values into the metrics and projections that resonated with business leaders. Despite this compelling case, resistance continued from various quarters. Several smaller carriers refused to adopt the protocols, positioning themselves as alternatives for passengers concerned about privacy. This marketing strategy backfired when it attracted customers specifically seeking environments where discriminatory behavior might go undocumented. The breakthrough came when National Airways released its first quarter results following initial implementation. Customer satisfaction scores increased by 12%, discrimination complaints decreased by 70%, and the airline saw a 3% increase in bookings among minority passengers. These metrics made a powerful business case that even the most reluctant executives found difficult to dismiss. 1 year after Flight 773. 1 year after the Flight 773 incident, the Jackson family gathered in the living room of their Chicago home, surrounded by close friends and select media representatives. The occasion was the official launch of the Maya Jackson Foundation, an organization dedicated to empowering young people facing discrimination and creating pathways for underrepresented youth in aviation and transportation industries. Maya, now 11 and a half, sat between her parents on the sofa, dressed in a simple navy dress with her signature airplane pin. Her demeanor remained remarkably composed for a child her age, though occasional fidgeting with the pin revealed the normal restlessness beneath her mature exterior. The foundation has 3 primary objectives, Amara explained to the assembled journalists. First, providing legal support to families whose children experience discrimination in travel or public accommodations. Second, creating educational opportunities for young people interested in aviation careers, with a particular focus on those from underrepresented backgrounds. And third, continuing our advocacy work to expand Equal Skies-style protocols to other transportation sectors. The Foundation represented a natural evolution of the work that had begun in the immediate aftermath of Maya's experience. While the Equal Skies initiative had successfully addressed many of the structural issues within commercial aviation, Amara recognized that discrimination extended far beyond a single industry and that lasting change required sustained effort across multiple fronts. "Mom, can I say something?" Maya asked quietly during a break in the questions. Amara nodded, handing her daughter the microphone with evident pride. Maya took a deep breath, her fingers briefly touching her airplane pin for reassurance. "When that lady was mean to me on the plane, I was really scared," she began, her voice small but clear. "I didn't understand why someone would be so angry just because I was sitting in a seat that was mine. But now I understand that it wasn't really about me at all. It was about her thinking some spaces weren't for people who look like me." The room fell silent. Journalists and guests alike captivated by this child's remarkable articulation of a complex social dynamic. "The Foundation isn't just about helping kids when bad things happen," Maya continued. "It's about making sure all kids know they belong wherever they have a right to be. And it's about helping adults learn that making spaces only for some people doesn't make those spaces better. It just makes them smaller." This insight that exclusivity diminished rather than enhanced the spaces from which certain people were excluded captured the philosophical core of the Maya Jackson Foundation's mission. Beyond the practical programs and legal advocacy, the organization aimed to promote a fundamental shift in how belonging and access were conceptualized across society. As Maya concluded her remarks, her father squeezed her shoulder gently, his eyes shining with emotion. The relationship between Isaiah and Amara had evolved through their shared commitment to supporting their daughter and channeling her experience into positive change. Though still divorced, they had found a deeper collaboration and mutual respect through this challenging year. The Foundation launch coincided with several significant developments in the aftermath of the Flight 773 incident. The Equal Skies initiative had been fully implemented across all major U.S. carriers, with international expansion proceeding steadily. The Commercial Aviation Authority had formalized many of the initiative's core principles into binding regulations, ensuring that even reluctant airlines would be required to maintain minimum standards for preventing and addressing discriminatory incidents. Meanwhile, Olivia Blackwell had completed her mandated community service and home confinement period. The experience had prompted a profound reassessment of her values and assumptions, though her path forward remained uncertain. Her legal team had approached the Jackson family about the possibility of her speaking at a Foundation event, not seeking forgiveness or redemption, but offering her perspective on how prejudice had warped her thinking and the difficult process of confronting deeply ingrained biases. 2 weeks after the Foundation launch, the community center on Chicago's South Side was neutral territory, neither the Jacksons' home turf nor associated with Olivia's community service. The room was simple, with windows overlooking a small garden and walls decorated with children's artwork. Amara had arranged the meeting at Maya's request, though both parents remained deeply protective and uncertain about the wisdom of this encounter. When Olivia Blackwell entered, she was visibly different from the woman who had boarded Flight 773 a year earlier. Gone were the designer clothes and carefully constructed facade of affluence. Her current attire, simple slacks and a modest blouse, reflected both her changed financial circumstances and a shift toward authenticity rather than appearance. Most notably, her body language had transformed completely, the entitled confidence replaced by a cautious humility that manifested in slightly hunched shoulders and hands that fidgeted nervously with the strap of her worn handbag. Maya sat between her parents, Pingu the penguin, still her companion after all these months. The stuffed animal wasn't just a comfort object, but a deliberate choice, a tangible reminder of who she had been on that flight, the child beneath the public symbol she had become. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," Olivia began, her voice softer than Maya remembered. I know this isn't easy for any of you. Isaiah nodded stiffly, his protective instincts evident in his posture, slightly forward, almost shielding Maya physically despite the absence of any tangible threat. Amara maintained her characteristic composure, though the tension in her jaw revealed her wariness. It was Maya's idea, Amara said simply. She wanted to hear from you directly. Olivia's gaze shifted to Maya, really seeing the child rather than the projection of bias that had colored their first encounter. I've been trying to understand why I did what I did to you, she said. Not to excuse it, but to make sure I never do anything like that again. Maya studied Olivia with the same thoughtful attention she brought to everything, her dark eyes taking in the changes in the woman who had once terrified her. Did you figure it out? She asked finally. The directness of the question seemed to catch Olivia off guard. She had clearly prepared for recrimination, defensiveness, even anger, but not for this straightforward inquiry from a child who simply wanted to understand. Not completely, Olivia admitted. But I've realized it wasn't really about you at all. It was about me, my fear of losing status, my belief that certain spaces belonged to certain people, my assumption that I could look at someone and know whether they belonged somewhere. Maya nodded, unsurprised by this assessment. That's what I thought too, she said. It wasn't about me. It was about what you thought when you saw me. This simple but profound insight that discrimination reveals more about the perpetrator than the target hung in the air between them, both an accusation and an opening toward something resembling understanding. The hardest part, Olivia continued after a moment, has been recognizing how much of my identity was built around those beliefs. When they started to crumble, I didn't know who I was anymore. And who are you now? Amara asked, her first substantive contribution to the conversation. The question wasn't hostile, but genuinely curious, a professional interest in whether meaningful transformation was truly possible. Olivia considered this thoughtfully. I'm not entirely sure yet, she replied with unexpected honesty. I'm trying to be someone who questions her assumptions, who recognizes her biases before acting on them, who understands that her comfort doesn't outweigh someone else's right to exist in a space. Some days, I'm better at it than others. This acknowledgement of ongoing struggle rather than completed transformation felt authentic in a way that claims of total conversion would not have. The work of dismantling deeply ingrained biases was necessarily incomplete, continuous, imperfect, and recognizing that reality demonstrated greater self-awareness than declarations of absolute change. Do you still feel uncomfortable when you see black people in first class? Maya asked the question disarmingly direct in the way that children's questions often are. Olivia flinched slightly, but didn't evade the inquiry. Sometimes, she admitted. The feeling still comes. The difference is that now I recognize it as my problem, not theirs. And I can choose not to act on it. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, moving beyond the specific incident to broader questions about belonging, prejudice, and the possibility of change. Maya asked about Olivia's community service experience, her current life, and her plans for the future. Olivia inquired about Maya's school, her interests beyond the foundation work, and how she had processed the sudden public attention. Throughout the exchange, something subtle but significant was occurring. Not forgiveness, exactly, not friendship, certainly, but a kind of mutual recognition of each other's humanity. Maya was seeing Olivia not as the monstrous figure who had terrorized her on the flight, but as a flawed human being capable of both harm and growth. Olivia was seeing Maya not as a symbol of her disgrace or an abstraction of otherness, but as a remarkably perceptive child navigating a complex situation with extraordinary grace. As the meeting concluded, Maya made an unexpected request. Would you be willing to talk to other kids who've experienced discrimination? Not right away, but maybe someday as part of the Foundation's work. Olivia looked genuinely startled. You think that would be helpful? I'm hardly a role model. "You're something different," Maya replied thoughtfully. "You're someone who did something wrong and is trying to be better. Kids need to see that too, that people can change if they really want to." This perspective, finding potential value even in the journey of someone who had caused harm, reflected Maya's remarkable capacity to transform painful experience into constructive possibility. It wasn't about excusing or minimizing what had happened, but about extracting meaning and purpose from it that extended beyond simple narratives of villainy and victimhood. 1-year anniversary. Inaugural Maya Jackson, Equal Skies. Flight National Airlines Flight 773 from Chicago to Los Angeles had been officially redesignated as the Maya Jackson Equal Skies flight to commemorate the 1-year anniversary of the incident. The symbolic gesture represented the airline's commitment to the principles established through the Equal Skies initiative, with special onboard programming highlighting the progress made and challenges still to be addressed. Though Maya had initially declined the airline's invitation to be on the inaugural flight, preferring to mark the anniversary privately with her family, she had reconsidered after discussing it with her parents and therapist. The decision to participate represented an important step in reclaiming the flight experience as something positive rather than traumatic. "Are you sure about this, sweetheart?" Amara asked as they approached the gate, her concern evident despite her support for Maya's choice. "We can still change our minds." Maya nodded, her grip on her mother's hand tightening slightly, but her expression resolute. "I need to do this," she said simply. "Not just for the foundation or the initiative, but for me. I need to sit in that seat again and know that it's really mine." The scene at Gate B-17 could not have been more different from Maya's original departure a year earlier. National Airways had transformed the area into a celebration of the Equal Skies initiative, with displays highlighting the program's impact and the broader work of the newly established Maya Jackson Foundation. Sophia Parker, now Senior Vice President of Customer Experience, greeted the Jackson family personally. "Welcome to the inaugural Maya Jackson Equal Skies flight," she said warmly, kneeling to Maya's eye level in a gesture of respect rather than condescension. "We've been looking forward to having you on board." The boarding process itself demonstrated the changes implemented through the initiative. Gate agents addressed all passengers with consistent courtesy cabin assignments, were verified through standardized procedures regardless of passenger demographics, and the pre-boarding announcement explicitly referenced the airline's commitment to ensuring respectful treatment for all travelers. "All passengers should have their boarding passes and identification ready," announced the gate agent following the newly standardized protocol. "Your assigned seat is guaranteed, regardless of appearance, background, or any other characteristic. If you experience or witness discriminatory behavior, please alert a crew member immediately." This explicit acknowledgement that belonging in a space wasn't determined by how someone looked represented a fundamental shift from the environment that had allowed Maya's experience to occur. The message wasn't just about anti-discrimination in the abstract. It was about affirmatively establishing every passenger's right to occupy the space they had legitimately accessed. As Maya settled into Seat 2A, the exact seat she had occupied during the original flight, she experienced a complex mix of emotions. There was a flutter of anxiety as memories of Olivia Blackwell's confrontational approach resurfaced, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of rightful belonging. This seat was hers, secured by a valid ticket, and no one would question her presence in it today. The flight crew had been specially selected for this inaugural journey, with Thomas Rivera serving as captain and Sophia Parker leading the cabin crew. Throughout the flight, there were periodic announcements highlighting different aspects of the Equal Skies initiative, from the monitoring systems that provided objective documentation of interactions to the training programs that helped staff recognize and address potential bias. Midway through the flight, Captain Rivera's voice came over the intercom with a special announcement. "Ladies and gentlemen, as we reach cruising altitude on this historic flight, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the extraordinary young passenger in Seat 2A, Maya Jackson, whose courage and dignity in the face of discrimination inspired the changes that have made commercial aviation more equitable for all travelers. A spontaneous round of applause spread through the cabin passengers, turning to smile at Maya, who blushed slightly at the attention, but maintained her characteristic composure. It was a moment of public recognition, but more importantly, it was a moment of complete belonging, Maya occupying space not as an interloper to be questioned, but as an honored passenger whose presence was celebrated. "How does it feel?" Amara asked quietly once the attention had shifted away, and Maya had returned to reading her book no longer about aviation pioneers, but about marine biology, her newest passion. Maya considered the question thoughtfully, her fingers absently tracing the outline of her airplane pin. "It feels like it should have felt the first time," she said, finally. "Just normal. Just me sitting in my seat, going somewhere I want to go." And in that simple statement, the normalization of what should have been unremarkable all along lay perhaps the most meaningful measure of the Equal Skies Initiative's success. Beyond the statistics showing reduced discriminatory incidents, beyond the institutional reforms and technological implementations, beyond even the expanded opportunities for underrepresented groups in aviation careers, was this fundamental shift. A black child could sit in a first-class seat without her presence being treated as exceptional, questionable, or out of place. Landing in Los Angeles. Full circle. As Flight 773 touched down at Los Angeles International Airport, Maya pressed her face to the window, watching as the massive tires made contact with the runway in a brief puff of smoke. The familiar sensations of landing, the slight bump, the roar of thrust reversers, the gradual deceleration felt different this time, transformed from the end of a traumatic experience into the completion of a meaningful journey. The terminal where they deplaned had been transformed with a special exhibit documenting the Equal Skies Initiative's first year of implementation. Large displays showed before and after statistics, a 68% reduction in reported discrimination incidents across participating airlines, a 12% increase in minority passenger satisfaction scores, and a significant drop in formal complaints requiring legal intervention. But beyond these metrics were the human stories, testimonials from passengers of various backgrounds who had experienced more equitable treatment, photographs of diverse flight crews, implementing the new protocols, and letters from children who had traveled without their presence being questioned or their belonging challenged. Maya Jackson," called a voice as they moved through the terminal toward baggage claim. A Hispanic woman in her 60s approached, holding the hand of a boy Maya recognized immediately, the same child who had shared his story about being displaced from first class on a train journey. "Mrs. Ramirez," Maya asked, remembering the boy's grandmother, whom she had contacted after their meeting at the convention center. Yes," the woman confirmed, beaming. "Miguel and we just completed our first trip using the Equal Skies protocols. First class all the way from Boston, and not one person questioned whether we belonged there." Miguel grinned, his earlier shyness replaced with evident pride. "I even told a flight attendant about meeting you at the convention," he added. "She gave me extra ice cream." This encounter a direct demonstration of how the initiative was changing. Real experiences for real people affected Maya deeply. It wasn't abstract statistics or institutional reforms, but the tangible difference in how a grandmother and grandson could move through the world with dignity rather than doubt. "Thank you for what you started," Mrs. Ramirez said, clasping Maya's hand warmly. "Because of you, my Miguel doesn't have to learn to make himself small to avoid trouble. He can just be a boy enjoying his journey." As they continued through the terminal, Maya found herself walking with a lighter step, the weight of the past year's experiences balanced by the visible evidence of positive change. She had set out 12 months ago, simply wanting to prove she could fly alone to demonstrate her independence and maturity. What she had accomplished instead was something far more significant, helping create a world where such proof would no longer be demanded of children who looked like her, where belonging wasn't determined by appearance but by the simple human right to occupy space with dignity and respect. Dads waiting outside Amara reminded her as they approached the exit. Isaiah had flown to Los Angeles 3 days earlier for a medical conference, timing his schedule to coincide with their arrival on the inaugural Equal Skies flight. Maya nodded, quickening her pace slightly. Despite the significance of the ceremonial flight and all it represented, she was ready now for something simpler. Family dinner at her father's favorite Los Angeles restaurant conversation that had nothing to do with discrimination or advocacy, and perhaps an evening walk along the beach if they finished early enough. Because that was perhaps the most profound accomplishment of all, not just changing systems or policies, but reclaiming the ordinary pleasures of childhood that discrimination too often disrupts or diminishes. Maya Jackson had become a symbol and a catalyst, but she remained fundamentally an 11-year-old girl who liked marine biology, still carried a stuffed penguin when traveling, and looked forward to ice cream after dinner with her parents. As she stepped through the terminal doors into the California sunshine, Maya spotted her father immediately. Isaiah stood tall among the waiting crowd, his familiar smile visible even at a distance. When he opened his arms, Maya broke into a run, leaving the weight of symbolism and ceremony behind, simply a child joyfully reuniting with her parent. And in that moment of ordinary happiness, uncomplicated, unqualified, unquestioned, lay the truest measure of what the Equal Skies Initiative had accomplished. Not just the right to occupy contested spaces with dignity, but the freedom to move through the world without constantly having to justify or defend one's presence in it. Maya Jackson had taken flight, and in doing so had helped clear the skies for countless others to follow. If this story touched you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories about standing up against discrimination. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this important message about dignity, respect, and the right of every person to be treated fairly, regardless of how they look. Remember, change doesn't just happen when something bad occurs. It happens when people like you decide to make things better. Let's work together to create spaces where everyone belongs.